So this happens to me all the time, and I'm sure some of you guys can relate to what I'm about to share. But when you're in a conversation with either a good friend or a family member, and you're talking about your loved one who's passed away, and they are talking as though are the authority on them, like they know all of their favorite things, like more than, and it happens to me all the time, and it really boils my blood because one, I am their mother. Like, who would know these boys better than me? And two, it's just disrespectful. And I know it's not the intention. I know that this happens without, it's not malicious, but I gotta say, it's super annoying and frustrating because there are very specific people who will do this and will like correct me and say, no, Donovan wouldn't be in law enforcement. He would be a model. What? Like, never once in his life did he ever say he was interested in modeling. His whole life went towards either military or law enforcement. But you're right. You know better than me, his mother. It just annoys me. So today's topic is no one is the authority on your person, and don't give them the power to try and take that position.
Well, can I just say, had he been offered a modeling job, he was so vain, he would have taken it. Trust me.
A
Trust me.
thousand percent he
I'm
was
not saying
very.
that's just his aunt speaking and his godmother speaking from her own perspective. Yes, but he would have jumped in the army 100% or been a police officer, all of that. Yes. And there was aspects of Donovan that I knew, but I still can't claim to say that I know all those things that you know.
Right.
There's no way. I actually have to laugh because I think that in the truth, let's just share something about Donovan. Donovan was a chameleon. So wherever he was 100% into that. But still, and that's that the thing is here. Whoever Donovan showed up for you in high school, and whoever he showed up for at his teacher, and whoever he showed up as his police captain, none of those people can come to you, Erica, and say, well, this is the Donovan that I knew, and I knew him more than you. And it's not like people come out and they say it. I think that what they do is that they try to switch your thought pattern or the things that you know, or they really are trying to insert themselves in the conversation, is what I think is happening. I think that naively we're trying to say, when this does happen, Erica, I think what we're trying to say is, I really love Donovan and I really miss him. But instead of saying that, we'll say, I remember this about him. And some of the stories they tell aren't really true.
Right, right. There's pieces added, or, and like I said, it's not, I don't receive it maliciously. I do receive it as, they also want to maintain that connection with him. But when they get to where they're correcting me on things, that's where I'm like, those are fighting words, and I really have to take a step back, because it's disrespectful. It is. And that's why this podcast, I feel very strongly about it, because we want to get this message out there. Be careful what you're saying
Yes.
to the
Yes.
griever. We
Yes.
have to be careful with our words, and it's okay to say, I miss him and I wish he was still here. I receive that 1,000%. But when you're talking about the way that he danced and his dance moves, and that, his favorite dance move was this, and he invented the Dougie, or, just something like, come on now, come on.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Did he love to do the Dougie? 1,000%. That's why we still do it at all the family parties, but it's just, we have to be careful with our words and making sure we're not stepping on the toes of the griever. The spouse, it's not okay to talk to the spouse about the way her husband cooked a certain meal as though you knew all the steps better than she would. You know what I mean?
I get it 100%. And what happens is, what is happening is that the griever is ultra sensitive. They're ultra sensitive to everything that's being said about their person. their nerve endings are exposed. And so if you say something a little off, they're going to notice it right away. And what happens a lot of times, Erica, is that people will come up and mention a story about Donovan or share a story about Donovan, or you'll put a post out about Donovan, and then they try to insert themselves into that situation or that story. And instantly what happens is you start churning inside and you're like, this is not what happened. That's not what was said, because the griever is aware of it. Not only that, I believe that the griever is trying to preserve the memory of their loved one. And when you come in and start changing stories or inserting yourself into events that you weren't a part of, or claiming to be the authority on the person, you're negating the griever's grief. You're
Yeah.
saying, I'm more important than you are. I'm more important than that.
Yeah. And that is hurtful because already we're carrying the heaviest load imaginable. And then to add these other little nuances in, it's like it's not helpful, it's hurtful. And like you said, it does start our brains churning and stewing in areas where we shouldn't even be there. We need to be focusing on our healing and take removing the negative energy that comes with comments, and just being able to live in peace and zen in the best way possible as a person who's healed and done a lot of grief work. We just don't need the bullshit,
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
it plainly.
On the same token, Erica, it is also not the place for you to come and tell stories that the griever didn't know about the person, especially if those stories are of a negative connotation, not the positive stories. I'm specifically speaking about the negative stories. If you knew something that the griever had done or was a part of, and you're like, I'm just going to share it with her now. Is that the right time to be sharing that story?
Right.
You need to think about that. You need to think before you absolutely share that story. I lost Sharon, my best friend of 15 years. Without a doubt, she was my soul sister, 100%. We connected in so many different ways. Here's the other thing that I know about Sharon to be true. There were so many women and so many men that also felt they were connected to her like that, because that's who she was. You just had to tell Sharon that somebody was struggling, and she was at their house helping them out. She was inserting herself. We were in a very tight community, and she would quite often call the person, what do you need? What happens? There'd be times that I'd hear about people and I'd call Sharon and say, hey, can you check on so-and-so? They need help today. And so a lot of times people were coming and sharing with me their Sharon stories. And it was great. It was great. I loved hearing them because I knew that's how she was. But I want to tell you something. Them sharing their stories was not taking away 1 ounce of my pain. And I think a lot of times people came and sharing their stories thinking, oh, let me just tell you how amazing she was, and this will make you feel better. And the truth was, it wasn't. It was nice to hear, and I loved it. I loved having a moment with everyone, but it didn't take away my pain. It was just nice to know that other people were still thinking about her. That was the
Yes.
extent of it. And that I could still talk about her openly with that person.
Yes, that part of sharing stories, I love.
Yeah.
I heard so many amazing stories about Donovan at his service. So that part I do love.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between
Yes.
sharing a beautiful story and a connection than trying to act as though they have ownership over your person. And also the amount of the enshrining that happens too.
Yes. Yes.
Because there's no such thing as a perfect person. So the way that some people, when they do comment on a post or something, and they want to enshrine Donovan as though he was this saint, and you and I are looking at the comments like, not so much. Like,
Who was that kid?
yeah, exactly. We also need to be careful of that, because it's okay to admit humanness, right?
And tell your truth.
Yeah, our people are human. I recognize Donovan's limitations. He was a beautiful,
Yeah.
like, caring and thoughtful young man, especially towards me, his mother, but he was also very selfish and self-absorbed. You know what I mean? As a young 21-year-old, they just kind of live in that me zone. He was right where he was supposed to be in terms of development, you know? So being real and saying the real is okay. Like I've had people tell me when I say stuff about that, like, oh, Donovan was selfish, correct me and say, well, you shouldn't say that about him.
Yeah.
That also is annoying.
Yes. So there's an undertone to this where people are trying to insert themselves into your grief, right?
Yeah.
So like a child, people that have gone to school with Donovan and maybe knew him as a student at school, and then all of a sudden they're 100% in the grief, or they're 100, they can't get beyond the loss of Donovan, and they came out of nowhere. I'm using this as an example, and I'm not speaking to anyone in particular, because I don't have an actual particular story, but I've seen this where people try to insert themselves into your grief, and they want to be grieving right along with you, and they want to be having the same depth of pain. And that's where we get to, this is the same thing as trying to be the authority, but is to trying to be on the same level or comparing
Yes.
our loss. And we
Yeah.
have to be very careful of that. I think those two go, they're brother and sister to each other, comparing your loss and being the authority on the person.
Yeah, that is true. That is exactly why we can't compare losses, because
Yeah.
you're completely minimizing the other
Yeah.
person's experience. I mean, that's like in the situation with the wife and the mother-in-law. You know what I mean? You're both grieving different parts of this man.
Yeah.
No one has more clout than the other. So that it's very important to recognize that, because I feel like sometimes there's this tug of war when a spouse, let's just say spouse or significant other dies, between the in-law and the partner. There's a tug of war, and it doesn't have to be. Both of you are grieving at 100% for the loss of that person, but your relationship with them was different, and we need
Yeah.
to acknowledge that. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't have 1% more grief because I was the mother. It's not how it works.
Erica, I think what happens also is that, getting back to enshrining, we have this tendency in the United States. I'm not sure what they do in other countries. We have this tendency in the United States with grief to enshrine the person and make them out to be perfect, and make them out to be the perfect person in the world. Part of the bystander coming in as the authority on our person is that they want to have this beautiful photo of this beautiful memory or this beautiful made up story of their person who they've lost. And so for them, they need everything to be perfect. And so it's almost like that old adage, don't speak don't speak ill well. What's the word?
Will, ill will.
Don't speak ill will of the law of the dead. Don't speak ill will of the dead. Don't say bad things about the dead person. And so it's hard for you to tell your truth and say that Donovan was selfish if people just want to say he was so handsome and he was so nice looking and he was the nicest person ever and he just did everything perfect and everything was great. When people around us want to start enshrining us, and the truth is, in order to get to healing, we have to tell the truth about our person.
Yeah.
We have to tell the truth about our person. So it becomes very easy for the person around us to start enshrining us and enshrining them. And that's why they want to come in with this authority and correct your story. And they don't want you saying anything negative about that person. They don't want you saying anything negative, because all of a sudden, and I'm speaking about myself. Remember when Austin died, I didn't want anything negative said about Austin. He was a child. He was an angel. It was you who said, Sharon, and sometimes he was a little shit. And when you said that, I was like, oh, we can say that? Like, we didn't know we could do that. I personally went into being the authority on Austin. I did that. I became the authority on Austin. I was enshrining Austin. I was making Austin out to be this perfect little angel. And you really, when you said that, just that one simple statement just made me go, okay, I got to start telling the truth.
Well, and it's easy to do that. It's easy to fall
Yeah.
into those lines because when the person is dead, you want to forget all the bad.
Yeah.
You really want to forget every struggle, every tear, every feeling of frustration. You only want to remember the positive. But like you said, to get to the healing, we got to tell the whole story. You
Yeah.
can't grieve if if you're putting this person on this pedestal and they never said a wrong thing or did a wrong thing, and then you're just looking at yourself, then it's you blame yourself. Then it's me. If I can't talk about the argument we had when I was trying to get him to put his shoes on, and it took me 45 minutes to get out of the house, then I have to make it up. I was a bad mother. I should have done better to explain it to him why we needed to leave on time. You know what I mean? Then you make it all about everything. Then you, the surviving person, is then assuming 100% of the responsibility. And that's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to grieve properly in that instance. You're gonna just browbeat yourself forever.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, it's a thin line, and that's not a thin line. It's a big line that people need to be aware of. So here's the thing. When you're sitting with a griever and they're sharing a story, whether you remember the story to be different or not correct, it is not your place to change it or come in with your own version of the story. Your job is to be the listening partner. Allow them to talk. Now, does that mean you never get to share the story or you never get to tell your part? No. Just pick an appropriate time later and you just say, hey, I was thinking, I remembered this story the other day, and da 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 da. You could share it. Don't correct the griever or try to change the story. Show up for the griever and be there for them and listen to them, because their brain is trying to figure out what has just happened to them. They're trying to sort out what's just happened to them. And yeah, they may have the story totally wrong, but if that's what they need at that moment, just show up for them. Don't push back, and definitely don't try to change the story in that moment.
That is so important. Read the room.
Yeah.
There's times when the griever is just talking and just needing to just say whatever it is that's coming to their mind. So just read the room. If you can tell if it's one of those moments, you can, as the observer, you can tell when that person is just needing that connection, and you just need to sit there and listen.
I was going to end the show, but I have one more thought that I want to add. If the griever has lost a person that was a total jerk, and you know they were a total jerk, what you're going to see from the griever at first is enshrine the person, because they're not going to tell the truth about the person. So they're going to not tell you the parts that were bad. They're not going to dwell on those. They're only going to pull out the good parts of the story. They're going to stay there for a long time. You coming in and saying, yeah, but didn't he throw hot coffee on you 3 years ago? You coming in, reminding them of all those parts of how it happened with her is not going to help her. You becoming the authority for her on her husband, who she's just lost, is not going to help her. She has to work that out herself as part of her healing process. And that's why one of the things we do, Eric and I quite often do, and we repeat it every week when we're reading with grievers, is that we talk about telling the truth about our loved one. And that griever will come there. She will come to that part of the story. She will come to her truth, but in her own due time. You bringing it there and reminding her every 5 seconds is not going to help her healing process.
Very, very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Friends, I hope this helped. Eric and I would like to invite you to join our Facebook group. We have an amazing Facebook group of women who are grieving. We show up in the group. We're there every day, and we'd be honored to have you join our Facebook group. The link is down below. We'll see you guys in the group.
Bye, friends. Thank you.
Bye.